So up till now, we've talked a lot about type, strategy, and authority, which are really important and are really the backbone of the whole system. And so just to revisit that for a minute. So if you're a manifestor, your strategy is to inform and to be informed. And if you are a projector, your strategy is to wait for invitations. And if you're a generator, your strategy is to wait and respond.
Attract and respond. We don't like the word wait.
Attract and respond. In terms of authority, so part of what we're doing in this whole course is moving our decision-making apparatus from our minds to a better place, which is in our bodies. And so our inner authority, if you have emotional authority, then your job is to wait and to feel into decisions and sleep on them and give yourself time to ride the whole emotional wave. And if you have splenic authority, it's appropriate to make decisions in the moment based on a gut feeling. And with sacral authority, also in the moment decisions based on a gut feeling, if possible, adding that sacral sound of if someone can ask you questions. And then if you have the various other kinds of projected authorities like ego projected authority, environmental authority, it's like talk it out, or everyone else knows what their authority is. Actually, I believe everyone in this class has one of the first three authorities, either emotional, splenic, or sacral. So we're going to talk now about our energy center. So if you probably already have noticed and understand that similar to a Hindu chakra system, we have in human design 9 energy systems. In a chakra system, there would be 7 energy systems. We have 9 because human design's better. We're just all better. We have more. Anyway, and so those in your body graph, well, first of all, the founder of human design believes that up until a couple hundred years ago, everyone had 7 energy centers. And then there was an electromagnetic event that occurred that added 2 energy centers. So, and we don't need to drill deeply into that. We'll probably touch on that later, but it's at some point that might show up in your investigation.
I do just want to jump in here for any of the skeptics in the room who were raised in a scientific, rational Western family like I was, highly educated, etc. And I thought I had foil on my head when I first heard about all this. And I thought, okay, prove it. And that's why we took a year to prove it. So it almost doesn't matter where it came from. What matters to me is, does it work? And I have yet to see that it doesn't. So I just want to toss that in there.
Thank you. And so the only reason that it matters right now, whether we're 7-centered or 9-centered, is that the founder of the system believes that when we went from being 7-centered beings to 9-centered beings, our minds could no longer keep up with all of the data, all of the energetic data coming in order to make good decisions. So that when we became 9-centered beings, we needed a different authority. And so thus, that's where that inner authority came from. You've noticed, I'm sure, on your body graphs that there's white shapes and colored shapes. And so the white shapes and the colored shapes refer to energy centers being either defined if they're colored or undefined if they're white. So energy centers are defined, being colored, if they have an active gate. And so we're not going to talk about what gates are now, but they're literally gates that let energy in. So if one gate correlates to another gate and another energy center, it makes a channel in between them, and thus makes both of those centers defined. So they work together. The channel and the gates and the energy center work together to make a defined center. Later classes, we'll talk more about that, but that's as deep as we're going to get into the gates and the channels at the moment. So because we have 9 energy centers, and they can either be open or they can be white or they can be colored. And I'll just keep referring to white and colored instead of defined and undefined. There's a lot of combinations as to who we can be relative to our energy centers being either white or colored. If you add them together, there's 512 possibilities of colored versus white channels. Does that make sense?
Keep going. It will.
Yeah. So
don't worry about the minutia.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, just in this one topic, there's 512 different designs we can have based on just what's colored and what's white. So definition, or a colored center, means that the energy type and flow for that center is fixed and reliable. It's fixed, reliable, and consistent. Day to day, month to month, year to year, from birth to death, it's going to be putting out basically the same vibratory range of energy, and we can rely on it, and it's always going to be there.
So what this means is, as you look at your own charts, when you see the colored in centers, what that means is you have a reliable, fixed, consistent source of energy in those centers. And we're going to talk about what each center means later.
Thank you. And so, along with being reliable in terms of showing up the same way all the time, the energy that you experience because of that center, it's also not vulnerable to conditioning from other sources. The undefined centers are going to be different, but your defined centers, you don't have a lot of vulnerability in your design centers to conditioning, either from other people or other sources. So an undefined energy center, which is white, is receptive. It's innately receptive. It absorbs, reflects, and magnifies energy. Much of that energy from the environment, and the way that energy got into the environment was from other people's defined energy centers.
So if you look at all the white in your chart, those are areas where you are reflecting, amplifying, and absorbing other people's energies, and it can affect you quite dramatically. And we'll talk about that later too.
Thank you. Yeah, so the white centers they're flexible, they're mutable, they're changeable. This is the openness and the variability in our design. So from birth onward, we're continuously conditioned from other people. Our white centers are continuously absorbing and amplifying energy. And another thing happens that I think is pretty cool that the founder of the system talks about, which is in our whiteness, in our openness, in our receptivity, we want what we aren't, meaning that we're innately drawn to people who are defined in the energy centers that we're not defined in. You've seen Linda in my slides probably, or our body graphs at times, and you can see that we have almost opposite.
Go to that one. There we are.
Yeah, we have almost, Linda has a lot of color in her design, and I have a lot of openness.
You know what that comes out to be sometimes? I'm fixed, I'm stubborn, I'm predictable, I'm impossible. But you always know what you're going to get.
Well, it means a lot of things. One thing it means is that I'm innately attracted to her because, for a lot of reasons, but from a human design point of view, because she's what I'm not. And so we are, like that trite line, we complete each other in many ways.
All right, I'm going to scroll back up to the other slides we're supposed to be on. Okay.
And we talk, so go to the not self slide. So we talk a little bit in...
Let me take that one for a minute.
Yeah, so what defined and undefined mean?
Colored, white, and on your handouts in a little bit, I'm trying to, because when I first started human design, I'm like, wait, what's an authority? What's a strategy? What's white? What's not? So really trying to help you track this. Okay, so there we go. All right, here we go.
Yeah, and so I think we've talked about self and not self before, and that's relative to conditioning. So when we talk about our self or authentic self, we're talking about living in alignment with our design, doing, being what we're designed to be. The not self is when we live according to our conditioning. And so where that conditioning happens is in our white centers, where there's openness and receptivity. And so what happens is we're vulnerable to living as our not self, living as we should live, living as other people would have us live, as opposed to how our own design is set up.
So just think for a second, when you're around really strong people, and if you really open, you will be really energetically affected by somebody who has such a strong definition. And just as you go through the world, just notice that, like, wow, that person really, really kind of swayed me. Chances are they probably have more definition in certain areas, and you're more open and susceptible in certain areas. It's fascinating.
All right, yeah, go to the next slide if you would. So just in case we haven't confused you enough, keep with us, we will. So there's a difference. I use these two. A lot of people, including me, use the word open and undefined interchangeably. They don't mean the same thing, though they kind of mean the same thing. So if you look at Linda's chart, which is the one on the left, which has all the color in it, the bottom, the root center, is completely what we call open, meaning it doesn't have any activated gates. If it had activated gates, you would see a partial channel. Like if you go back to my chart, which is on the right, you'll see that I have a bunch of white centers, but there's what are called hanging gates in all of those centers, meaning there's short lines that either connect or don't connect to something else, which makes them undefined but not open. So what this means in a practical sense is an open center is going to have the highest degree of receptivity and vulnerability. A defined center is going to have the least amount of receptivity and openness. And what's called an undefined center but not open is going to be somewhere in the middle. It's going to have our white centers actually with hanging gates have some qualities of definition, even though they're not completely defined. So hopefully that makes sense.
Let me answer Donna's question. Would a lot of colored centers mean that someone is less flexible or less able to experience change? Theoretically, yes, on a base level. However, there's even more intricacies within the design that make someone like me, who look like I'm impossible to be with, actually more open than I appear. Wouldn't you say, honey?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So it's a great question. There's a surface level fixedness or a surface level stubbornness, and then which is how I experience Linda sometimes, or much of the time. However, I don't have to scratch the surface very deep to actually find sort of a deep flexibility and openness to flex and change. And there's a reason, there's a mechanical reason in the design, which I'm holding myself back from going down that hole, even though I want to, but I'm not going to go down. I'm not going to go down that hole right now, but eventually we're going to explain exactly why that happens.
All right. So Stephanie asks, is a partial line called a hanging gate? Yes.
Correct.
And where they are connected completely means that they have a full channel. So you see over here, we don't have to worry about this yet, but to answer the question, this is a full channel. It's where energy flows, and no connections are. Not sure what that means, but yes, you've got the right idea there, Stephanie. But let's go back up to a higher level of just gates just centers for the moment.
But yeah, thanks. That's a great question.
Yeah, good questions.
So we're going to talk about the centers themselves now. We're going to start. So there's 9 centers, and there's a bunch of different variables in each center. And so I've been trying to think about how we can organize this in a way that doesn't just go down a rabbit hole in every center. So what we're going to talk about first, and we're just going to touch on this briefly, is how energy flows in the body relative to all of these centers, because the way that energy flows in our body gives the centers, we can group them into rough groups of different kinds of centers so that it might make a little bit of sense. So we're going to go over the different kinds of centers for a minute, and then we're going to get into individual centers in more depth. So hopefully this makes sense what I'm saying. Does this?
You following? Yeah.
So there's one manifestation center, which is the throat. And I've heard people say all roads lead to Rome relative to human design. So if you look at the throat, you'll see that a bunch of gates and channels come into the throat. And so the throat functions as sort of the town center in a human design, in a human being, in a body graph. And we'll talk about that later. But the throat is the center of manifestation in terms of both communication and also in terms of initiating action. And so let's move to the pressure centers. So what pressure centers do is that they push energy toward what are called awareness centers. I know you don't know what awareness centers are yet, but you will in a minute. And so pressure centers take in energy and push it to the next place, which is an awareness center. And go back a second, the two pressure centers, as you can see, are the head center on top and the root center on the bottom. And so now awareness centers, the energy gets pushed into the awareness centers, which is the ajna on top, the solar plexus to the right, and the spleen to the left. And those interpret the energy in terms of consciousness, self-consciousness and self-awareness. So splenic intelligence, which is the brown triangle on the left, is survival awareness. Solar plexus awareness is emotional awareness. And then cognitive awareness comes in to the ajna, or we could call it, intellectual awareness or intellect or mind awareness. And so next, the energy goes to or not next, it happens at the same time. So there's 4 motor centers. So motor centers make energy. They make energy to actually
get stuff done.
Manifest our lives. I mean, the actual things that happen in our life, manifestation happens as a result of motor center. So the root energy gets things going, and the sacral energy is the energy of work and reproduction, and the solar plexus motor is an emotional motor of feeling, and then the heart motor is a motor of will and willpower. And so then the last type of center is the identity center, or the G center. So the G center establishes our identity as it connects to life as a whole. It's basically how and where we're wired to the universe in its entirety. And the G center is actually magnetic in that it pulls life and the universe into itself, which is an interesting concept.
Okay. So, you're not going to get tested on any of that. So just let it wash over you. We just wanted to show you how energy flows, what the different sort of locales are. What's really going to get juicy is the next section, where you're going to want to pull out your handouts, because we've tried to make it very clean for you to follow this next section. This is where you really get to understand who you are and how you operate in the world, and therefore how your business, what best business strategies and practices are really going to line up with your design. So if you get your handouts out, what I want you to do is look at, as we go through each center, we're going to start with the throat. I want you to circle like you see there. If you're colored in, circle that column. If you're not colored in and you're white, circle the column next to it. And those are going to be the traits that relate to you. And as we move through each center, circle them, because I want you to just know at a glance, oh, that's my, my traits, my potential traits. Okay. Any questions on that? Oh, we're going a bit fast, Michael. Can you go back to the motor centers, please?
Of course. So the motor centers. So as we said, the motor centers actually produce manifestation. They make things happen, as opposed to the awareness centers, which are interpretive, and the pressure centers, which sort of move things to the next level and move energy to the next level. So the root center is we'll talk more about that, but it's an adrenal center. So it moves energy. The sacral center above that, which makes you a generator if it's defined, that actually is the energy of life. It's life energy. It's the energy of creation and reproduction. The solar plexus, as I mentioned, it's the energy of feeling. It's the energy of spirit. It's the energy of it's the energy of emotion. It's the literally waves of emotion. And the heart energy, that's like willpower. That's ego power. It's stamina. Staying the course is tenacity. It's like the energy of tenacity. So hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Patty. And we will come back to motors, not to worry. This is not a one and done kind of thing. Yeah. So again, take out your handout, circle whether that throat center is colored in or not colored in. And those are going to be your traits. And now we're going to step through these, which is good. And we're going to throw in some fun examples too, to bring this really home for you. Okay.
Great.
So here's the throat. There we go.
So we'll start again with the throat center. In relation to all the different centers, I'm going to mention a biological correlation. So what system that we're used to thinking about in the body, or medical system or anatomy system, it correlates to, because they have a very close correlation. So the biological correlation with the throat is the thyroid and the parathyroid, which are endocrine glands associated with metamorphosis and transformation. And I really like making this connection, because I find human design so elegant in so many ways. And one of the ways that I find it elegant is how it maps to the systems that we've heard about, our whole lives, like the endocrine system. And the purpose of the endocrine system is so perfectly matched with what a throat center does in human design. So the throat center's primary function is to manifest through communication. We've talked about that before, and it obviously relates back to our strategies and our authorities, but it's where the rubber meets the road, in terms of we communicate to the world, and then that communication has impact, and we get that's what Linda and I are doing right now. We're manifesting through communication. The secondary function is to manifest through action. So the same energy center isn't just about communicating, it's also about taking action in the world. So taking concrete actions is a manifestation of the same center. So did you have something to say about that?
Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, so people with undefined throats can feel a pressure to speak at inopportune times. That's a tendency of an open throat, and I have one, and I can attest.
So those of you who open mouth insert foot, it might be your open throat that's doing that.
Yeah, and so there, I go back to like being a kid in school and having an open head and an open throat and feeling pressure from people around me, and I opened my mouth all the time and blurted out things that teachers and often other students didn't want to hear, and so that didn't work out so well. And I realized later that it's not because I had ADD or whatever. I mean, it's because I had an open throat and an open head, and those work together, and that's what happens.
So what that means is he's really susceptible. Any of you with openness, you're really susceptible to what's going on around you. You're going to absorb other people's stuff, and it might come through you if you're not careful.
Yeah, and especially if you have an open head also, and we'll talk later about what the open head means, but an open head and open throat will work together to have you put your foot in your mouth, and certainly has worked for me. It's particularly important for people with undefined throats to speak according to strategy. In my case, I'm a projector, so being invited to speak is pretty important for me. That I'm reticent. The more I study my design, the more I wait for an actual invitation, for a lot of reasons. One is that if I'm not invited to speak, nobody listens, and that's not that fulfilling to me, to not be listened to.
Well, and the other thing is, you'll notice on our Facebook page, Michael is like a Facebook you-know-what, because it's constant invitations. On our Facebook page, if you ask a question and you actually ask him, he is all over it, but he will never just post independently, because it doesn't feel right. It's not aligned with his design.
It's rare. I mean, the only time that I'll post on Facebook to our group without a specific invitation is if something's going on for me that I absolutely know is that a lot of people are going to relate to. So you'll see a few posts like that on like about emotional wave the other day. Well, I knew that half of us have emotional authority, and I just knew that I intuited that a lot of people were riding the emotional wave, and that would have similar experiences. So that's where that came from. If you have an undefined throat, being conscious of your aura can be really useful. I don't know this for sure, but I intuit that people with undefined throats might have a particularly strong aura. And so what happens is, when you let your aura speak for you, your aura creates a strong statement and also an opening to put words into. At least that's the experience I've had, and I've heard other people with open throats relate similar experiences.
If you are operating from your mind, you're not going to allow this natural unfoldment to occur. when you relax into your strategy, your authority, you're responding, you're attracting, then the right words at the right time will show up. But if your mind is in charge, game over.
Yeah. So a great question, if you have an open throat, to ask yourself before speaking or during is, am I trying to get attention so that I can be heard? Am I trying to get attention so that I can be heard? And that's a good refocusing, thing for me, because if I am, it's not a good way to be heard. Yeah. So a defined throat center is designed to speak, and how it speaks is controlled by what it's connected to.
So we're talking about now a colored in throat.
Yeah.
Flip side of that.
So for instance, if your throat is connected to your head, you can speak your mind, literally. Or if it's connected to your solar plexus, you can speak about your feelings. So the slide here shows all the different gates in the throats, and it shows sort of the vibratory range, what it looks like. And we're not going to drill right into this right now, but I thought it's interesting to just look at it and to realize that all the various gates of the throat relate themselves slightly differently from one another. And you can, if you read the slide here, you'll get an idea of what that looks like.
Just let this wash over you. Don't get your head too hung up on all of the numbers and words.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is strategy. Go back to your strategy when it comes to living your design relative to your throat. Manifestors can just talk. If you're a manifestor and you have an idea, blurt it out. If you're a generator, you need to respond. And if you're a projector, you need to wait to be invited. And that's going to be this, you're going to have the best results relative to that center.
Next.
Yeah. Unless there's any questions about, while we're on this, if there's any question about the throat center, just pop it up there.
Burning question. We'll take questions at the end as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the head center. So the biological correlation of the head center is it regulates, and this is cool, I think, it regulates the flow of information between the gray areas of the brain, which are the unconscious part of the brain, and the neocortex, or the conscious part of the head. So medically, what happens in the pineal gland is exactly what human design says happens between the head center and the ajna center. So there again, it's a direct parallel, which I think is cool. So the head pressure, so that, as we said, the head is a pressure center. So how that pressure is going to show up is one of two ways. It's going to show up as inspiration or imagination. Or in the not self, it's going to show up as pressure to know. It's going to show up as pressure to know things, largely things that can't be known by the brain or by the mind. And so that's how head pressure shows up.
I'm going to jump in here for a second, because it's unbelievable to me. I have a daughter who's 17, super, super bright, one of those, sharp kids, and her entire chart is colored in except for her head, which is white. The girl can't figure out what to order off a menu. She can't figure out, whether to go to this or that event. And yet she's so driven and she's so consistently defined, but her head is open, and it amuses me because she's so bright, but she just trips over herself. It's just an example of,
as is her boyfriend said.
Her boyfriend's white also, for goodness sake.
Yeah, they stand there for half an hour wondering what
are we going to do? Yeah. Wow. Anyway.
So the undefined head can feel environmental pressure to have answers, and it can get stuck in loops of thinking about things that don't matter. I can certainly relate to this. I get stuck in these loops, especially if there's a little unresolved emotion, or I'm just, I don't like the way I'm feeling at the moment. I'll get in these mind loops sometimes that I just can't get out of. Where the real power of the undefined head is, and the positive use of it, is exploring mysteries. To be in the kind of holistic mystery of life, as opposed to trying to figure out things.
So Michael has two speeds that I notice. One is when, as you can see on your chart, when you're acting as yourself, in living your design, versus your not self, when you're not in your design. So Michael has two channels, I've noticed. When he's in his design, holy moly, he has the most brilliant ideas. He's got clarity and crispness and imagination, and connects dots I could have never connected. And when he's not in his design, It's like the smartest man I know is like a doe in headlights. He can't really see. He can't really know. He's just very confused. It's stunning. And it's just a matter of where is his head at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I get in the fog. I mean, I get
Totally
in the fog
gets in
and
the
there's
fog.
not, it's because I'm undefined and I don't have the internal resources to break through that fog. Actually, environmental energy breaks me through the fog.
Or me, I shake him up, one or the other.
So the defined head, on the other hand, can get stuck in habits of thought and have a difficult time being open to new ideas and inspiration. It can sort of habitate a rut. The defined head in its positive aspect is a constant source of inspiration and imagination. So there again, that same thing between openness and definition is stubbornness versus consistency.
So again, map this to your own lives. I'll give you my own anecdote. So I have a lot of definition, a lot of color in my chart. My head is one of them. All 3 children are white in their heads. So essentially I can either brainwash them because I'm going to constantly condition them, or if in my alignment, I'm going to inspire them. And I also do that with my tribe and when I'm up speaking, etc. So as an entrepreneur, take a look at, what your design is and how you can use that in the world for good.
Another example, as Linda said, her kids have open head and she has a defined head. I have an open head. So I'll talk to her kids about doing something that's a great idea, and they'll be, okay with, kind of no energy around it or whatever. And then Linda will walk in the room, say the same thing, and all of a sudden they just snap to attention. Yeah, let's go do it. It's like, what just happened there?
Either they're scared of me. I don't know. Right.
So we're going to move to the next center,
Right.
which is the ajna, which is the biological correlation here is the pituitary gland. And so those are the master glands of the endocrine system, which are responsible for the overall bodily health. So that's interesting to map that to what the ajna does. So the ajna's function is to research and conceptualize. This is where the intellect lives as we know it. What its job is not, what an effective job for it to not do is to make major decisions. And we've talked about that with inner authority. So someone with an undefined ajna can see many sides to an issue. They're typically fair, judicious, empathic, and open-minded. An open ajna does not have a fixed way of thinking. It can process in a myriad of ways. It can come from a lot of different directions. And it can be hard for a person with an open ajna to hold on to a fixed idea, and the world can seem complex because they can see so many possibilities. And it can be hard to feel confident in their decisions. And I experience that a lot. And I noticed between Linda and I that there's a much different dynamic when, we'll have something to do, what are we going to do about a certain situation? And I can see like 100 different possibilities, and I can see the results of all those possibilities. And I get really overwhelmed with the equation. And then Linda's like, what are you talking about? Let's just go do A, B, or C,
Yeah, which sometimes I'm really fixed and stubborn and I can't be open to new ideas. And sometimes we need that kind of, oomph. So it just depends. So in your business, in your life, just notice where you're vulnerable, where you're strong, and act from that.
The defined ajna is designed to hold information. It's trustworthy and reliable, but fixed in how it works. It's especially important for a person with a fixed ajna or defined ajna to make decisions from inner authority and not from the mind for that reason. And so, yeah, I mean, it's great when Linda and I are working together because I can ask her what it is we were working on 5 minutes ago.
Sometimes he forgets. Okay, I want to map this to your businesses now. So we looked at the head and the ajna, the first 2 on the top. And I got to tell you, when I was doing the enrollment conversations for this program, and when I do, prospect calls or whatever, I can almost tell who has an open head and open ajna and who doesn't. And here's why. And I want you to notice this in yourself and in people you're talking to and trying to sell. People with openness, so I can tell because sometimes they get lost and they can't kind of stay focused, and they have so many ideas and things they want to do in their business, or so many ideas they think they should do in their business, that they can't see the forest for the trees. This is them not living by their design, and it's okay that it's a confusing world out there in our 24/7 ADHD world. So when I'm selling, I can pick up on that, and when I know what they need is direction and focus. And of course, with my definition, it's very easy to have me help them line up. If you're the flip side of that, just be aware of it, that when you are speaking, you may need to kind of tighten it up a little bit. Or when you're selling, you may want to need to kind of tighten it up a little bit. Tighten it up just means have clarity, stay out of confusion, have a consistency to what you're saying, and things will flow a little bit better. The flip side of that, I'll just out myself here. I can talk too much. I can be too strong, too focused. I mean, ask Michael, who, if you get in a fight with me, you don't want to be on the other end, because I'm going to talk a blue streak and I'm not going to word it edgewise, because blah, 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 right? So that's the danger of those of us with a lot of color or definition. We don't come up for a breath. We don't kind of pause. We don't look at things from other viewpoints because we're very fixed and clear. That is actually by design. It's not a flaw. And knowing who I am, and knowing who my clients are, and knowing who Michael is, just makes it easier to engage, to sell, to move forward.
To address the question that I think Dorinda had about how do I live my design or not in regard to the head center. When I get away from my design relative to head center, usually I'm using my mind too much. I'm trying to build a world. I'm trying to live my life through my head or through my mind. And so, and what typically the effect of that is I reach a blank spot, or I get
he gets that doe and headlights look.
Yeah, I get the doe and headlights look. And so the strategy for me, the best strategy, the quickest strategy to get into a different place is to actually get completely out of my head. Go take a bicycle ride, take a walk, get outside, get in my body, do something. I have a design that all my motors, I have defined motor centers. And so I have a need to be very physical. And being physical gets me out of my head, which ironically clears up my thinking process. I come back. If I put my head on rest and go do physical things, connect either exertion or just using my hands to make something, fix something, repair a sale, whatever, I come back and my head's clear. And yeah.
And I think that's true for a lot of us. And that's because, and I said this last week on Friday's call, get in your bodies. Do what you need to do to feel your body and access the energy that is there for decision-making and guidance, especially when your head is all twisted up.
Yeah. Would you like to move on to the G center?
Let's go. Yeah.
So the G center is a cool thing. It's connected to the liver, the part of the body. It's the center of our identity. Human design would say that it's the seat of love and direction, our direction in the world. And human design, and I've heard a lot of people say that it's the place where the soul is located. It's called a magnetic monopole, which Linda hates me using this term.
I don't like this term. It's too rabbit hole-ish.
But let me just say what magnetic monopole means. So it's magnetic because, as I said before, it has the effect of pulling life toward us, pulling the universe toward us. It's literally magnetic in its capacity. And the monopole part refers to all the other energy centers have a binary function, meaning that they have an unconscious and a conscious aspect to them. The G center doesn't. It's what's called a monopole because it doesn't have, it's all one thing. And it's our life direction. It's our soul. It's pulling life toward us. It's attracting life experience. And so it functions as a single entity. Individuals with an undefined G will tend to have tremendous empathy and understand other people's direction and self, which is a cool thing. They'll really get people. If you talk to someone that, maybe you know them well or you don't know them well, you just met them and you get, wow, this person really gets me. There's a pretty good chance that they have an undefined G, so that someone with a defined G will put out energy of direction and identity. and then the undefined G will amplify it and reflect it at a deep level. So if you have an undefined G, you're going to be sensitive to being in the right place at the right time. I have an undefined G, and I'm very environmentally sensitive. As Linda would say, if I walk into the house and there's, mess and clutter and stuff out of place and stuff piled in the way and, whatever, it doesn't work for me. Like, I can't do the next thing until I put my environment in order.
It's true. And I can ignore the dishes in the sink and the kids' backpacks and the clothes because I have a task at hand and I have a fixed viewpoint of what needs to get done, and I'm full steam ahead.
Yeah. I mean, putting this course together, I have to clean the room first and have it just feel right to me. And that's my open G, magnifying where I am. Also, people with an undefined G can be chameleons, and that they can fit well in many different environments and with many different kind of people. And I definitely have always felt that about myself, that I can fit in with a lot of different people, and I sort of take on the tendencies of those people. I blend right in. Linda less so. I mean, she is who she is, no matter who she's with or where she is.
Doesn't mean that I can't sort of roll with the punches. It's just by design, he has a proclivity to become a chameleon, and I just come in as I am. And yeah. People are attracted to who I am, and and attracted to him because he makes people feel really good. So. And
I'd be a better spy.
Yes, you would be a better spy.
Yeah, and so the variable nature of the undefined G can make it hard to feel lovable. So people like myself with an undefined G, we often don't really know who we are, because who we are has a lot to do with what's around us and who's around us and what we're identifying with. And so in between, there can be some kind of empty spots where we're not identifying with anybody or anything, and it can actually feel hard to be lovable.
I find my son, who has an open identity center, being dominated by his older sisters rather, and being really terrorized by the girls at school. And from a human design, he's 7th grade. From a human design perspective, it's fascinating. He is absorbing, reflecting, amplifying all of that feminine energy. And by the end of the day, he doesn't know which way is up. I don't really know how to help him, but it's fascinating to watch.
Thank you. So
Pamela's husband's G is open, wish he had the cleaning urge. Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, yeah, we're not all tidy.
That's a blessing and a curse.
We're not all tidy. We're just environmentally sensitive if we're living our design. So that's
not everybody's living their design.
That's the other thing to keep in mind. If someone has a certain design and they seem to live opposite it, well, we're not all living our design.
No. And actually, Donna, that was a great thing that you posted last night. We'll have to see if your birth time changes anything. But some people go, this actually isn't who I am. It could be that we've been conditioned to be somebody else. And we're acting as somebody else instead of ourselves. So it gets very nuanced there.
Oh, that's for sure. I mean,
yeah.
Thank you. So people with a defined G, if you have color in your G, are here to give love and be independent. So they're actually filling up, we're back to you complete me. Linda is putting energy into my open G. They're here to give love and independent to the world. Their sense of self is typically strong and unwavering. They tend to have a deep sense of connectedness. Where it starts to go a little awry sometimes for someone with a defined G is that they might be lacking in empathy about other people's direction. They might have trouble understanding why other people are the way they are if they're much different than they are, if that makes sense. I would say, we'll see if you agree with this, but I would say it's easier for me to understand why you are who you are than it is for you than for you to understand why I am.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. Okay.
In a relationship, the undefined G person can get lost with the defined G person.
Yeah.
And there's often a sensitivity. So to go back to that environmental sensitivity. So, yeah.
Well, so in a business context, if you are going to have a meeting, and you have an open G center and it's a sales meeting or a presentation, you really want to make sure that you take great care of your environment, of what you're stepping into, or prepare yourself if it's going to be chaotic, because you will get distracted, pulled apart. It's like if I take Michael to a restaurant and the music's too loud, it bothers me, but it doesn't energetically mess me up. So same in a business environment. Just be aware how sensitive or not you are to your environment. So,
yeah. I mean, here's a for instance. I used to love to go to CrossFit and work out. It was exactly the workout I liked. It was good for my body. I always felt good when I left. I felt like I was in some ways the best shape of my life, except that every CrossFit gym I've ever gone to feels the need to play really loud, either rap or techno or heavy metal or just really raucous, awful noise during the whole workout. And finally, after a year and a half of that, I just realized at some point I just couldn't take it anymore. As much as I loved the actual workout, and I wasn't able to get anybody to turn the damn music down or to, consider.
And there's Michael over in the corner. He's got not just earplugs, but like headsets, noise canceling headphones. If anybody's been to CrossFit, you know what we're talking about. And it's just going to wreck his system. So
yeah,
couldn't happen.
Anyway, do you want to talk about the Will Center?
Sure. All right. We're gonna do maybe one or two more. We didn't want to jam all this down your throats. So we're gonna go to the top of the hour. If you want to keep going after that, we can do that, get through all 9, or we can let this breathe and come back next week. But let's move on to the Will and the Heart Center. So you'll hear this called Will, Heart, or Ego Center. We don't like the word ego because it's too tainted for obvious reasons. And human design doesn't mean it in the modern sense that we know it to mean. So we use the word will and heart. It connects to the heart, the stomach, and the thymus. And it's a motor, it's actual motor, which means it has energy to bring forth things on the material plane. So energetically, it's about value, business management, how you're going to allocate your resources and the energy to get things done when the going gets tough. It's like willpower, right? You're going to kind of move through it. You're going to push through it. You're going to harness that energy center. People who don't have this defined, so if it's white and it's undefined, you, according to human design, will not have consistent access to what we call the willpower. So you might have trouble sticking to things like diets or exercise regimes or other things that we consider to be disciplines. And it's important for those of you without the definition and with undefined will to use, again, your strategy and your authority. So projector, generator, manifester, your strategy and your decision-making authority when you enter into agreements, because you don't want to get stuck in a situation that you're not going to follow through on or that ultimately is wrong for you. So you don't want to rely on your mind, and you don't want to rely on willpower or sheer force of will. You want to rely on those inner resources, the strategy and authority. As you know, we're in a just do it culture. So people with undefined will are especially not able to work that way consistently. And if they live as they should, as you're told you should, you're going to find yourself spiraling and letting yourselves down and burning out. So give yourself a break in terms of, I'm going to do this. You may have an open will, and it may just be harder for you to do willpower type things. I was working with a woman, and she said, oh my gosh, the only way I actually lost weight was when I was in a structured group and we would meet on a regular basis. I can't do it on my own, because she needed that kind of bolstering. So in your business, if there's certain things you need to get done and you're just finding you're procrastinating and you actually want to do them, you may need support, some sort of structure. Here's where the rubber meets the road with entrepreneurs. It's really common for people with an undefined will to undervalue yourself and undercharge for your services. So pricing, right? Stepping into your value, owning it. And so you might sit there and say, okay, but I have an open will center and I don't know how to charge. So what am I supposed to do? Just know that you have a proclivity to be vulnerable there. And if you just know that alone may solve the problem. But if it doesn't, we can build some structure so that you're able to step into your value and offer your services at the right price. All right. Now, somebody with a defined or colored will has access to willpower, and we can act very willful, I say on my own. And it's really important for a person with a defined will to only make promises that align with their design and to keep those agreements. So defined will and undefined will people are susceptible to power struggles. So what, do you want to say more about that? About when an undefined and a defined come together?
Yeah. So what's happening there if two people come together and one's defined and one's undefined, the person with the undefined center is going to magnify or amplify the willfulness or the willpower of the person with the defined will. And because of this amplification, if they have different ideas about how to do things, those different ideas are going to get magnified, blown up, and have a pretty good chance of being in conflict with each other. Does that?
Yeah. Okay. So back to the person with a colored or defined will, it's important to rest. It's important not to overtax the body, because if you do, you're going to lead to health problems. Now, this sounds like something obvious, but we can crank so hard because we have a natural motor and we have a natural proclivity to stick to things. We can overdo it. Okay. A defined will person can actually empower somebody without defined will. And I can temporarily make someone feel like they have willpower, and then it might fall apart when we depart. So what I'm saying is, if you have a defined will, as I do, and you hook up with someone with an open will, I can feed into that person's open will, get them all revved up, get them really motivated, and then when we separate, things just deflate. So it's just something to notice. So if you have clients who can't seem to stick to things, but they get really revved up when you work with them, then just put some structures in place so they'll be successful, because they're going to get disappointed and upset with themselves that they're not moving through things or sticking to things. Okay. I want to check in right here. Oh, you butt heads all the time with your daughter. Yeah, see, just knowing this stuff is revolutionary, I find. And can actually make it really fun in the family, even though they think you're crazy half the time. I want to check in. It's 12:55. We have, how many more? 3? 4 more centers. And we can keep going. Michael and I can keep going, or we can let this breathe. We can open this up for questions. So I just want to hear from a couple of you. If you'd like us to just keep going, or if you'd like to let this breathe. My tendency is to just my instinct is to let this breathe, and we can pick up part 2 next week. But does anybody really no, I want to keep going? Can you put in the chat how you're feeling now, or questions that you have? Keep going. Yeah, and that's the other thing. If you've had enough, you can catch the rest of it on tape. Okay, Patty has to leave. I know, and we basically said that we would, so there we go, half and half. We basically said we'd kind of make the classes an hour. Generators keep going. Exactly. All right, we're going to do one more. How about that?
That makes sense. Yeah, let's do one more.
And then we'll take questions, and then we'll do the final 3 next week. All right, how's that? Sound good? All right, I'm going to turn this back over to Michael. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So the last thing I'm going to say about the Will Center is that I've heard people say that that people with defined will can be susceptible to literally heart problems because we can push ourselves further than we should. And there's some examples, like Tony Robbins in his 50s had a heart attack, and there's some other people with defined will whose names I can't remember at the moment, but there's a lot of examples that I read about. So that's just something to keep in mind, that if you have defined will, be sensitive to your own system, your own body. You have the ability to push yourself harder than you should, and it would be better not to. So, especially if you're a generator, my goodness. Yeah. So what happened, just to give you an example. So as some of you know, I have my 3 teenagers and my father, and I am divorced. And so when Michael and I didn't live together, we'd be together when I didn't have my kids, and that I get all restored and really grounded and feel really, really good. And then he'd return me to my family, and I would get absolutely chewed up and spit out because of my situations and the business and whatnot. I would just go, 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 go. And I had to do this, and I was committed to that with the kids, and I would completely get fried. And he'd say, "What happened to you? You were in such good shape when I left you." Like, yeah, well, and it wasn't just because life is life. It's because I'm a generator with defined will. I have 3 motors. I'm just going to go, and I'm not going to come up for air. So this is not good. Yeah, I'd fix her and she'd break herself, and I'd fix her and she'd break herself. And so finally we moved in together. Live together. Because I was just tired of fixing her.
Okay. All right. Let's do one more.
All right. So the next one's the solar plexus. And so the solar plexus, you can see the shape you can see where it is on the slide. So that's associated with the lungs, kidneys, prostate, and pancreas. It's an energy that's different from other energy centers in that the energy fluctuates in waves, as opposed to the root center that comes out in pulses. And most of the energy centers, most of the other centers, the energy is more or less a steady tone, so to speak. But the solar plexus is literally putting out waves, like it would look like a sine wave if you were looking at what was coming out of it. And its function is to allow us to get a sense of emotional clarity and well-being. So what's happening with it, it's constantly moving us from pain to pleasure and back again. And I talked about this in the Facebook group this week. So we live in a culture that worships happy and pleasurable side of the emotional wave. I don't see many commercials for products that'll help you access, hopelessness and despair. Most products I see want you to access happiness. So many of us try to manipulate this wave in order to stay on the side that has the feelings that we identify as being positive, And so, how do we do that? We do that with drugs, with activity, with various strategies to try and stay happy, to stay upbeat, to stay hopeful. And the long-term consequences of this are usually negative. And I've certainly found this to be the case, because if we're repressing half of our emotional wave or more, we lose access to that energy. And this is pretty important energy that in my case, it seems to be directly related to insight and manifestation. Usually manifesting for me comes out of kind of a low state. So I spoke on Facebook about being on the kind of the hopeless side of this wave a few days ago. And some things fed into that. It was my normal rhythm. Plus, a divorce just became complete, and I sold a house that, And so I went into this, and it was my normal time to go to the hopeless or the despair end of the wave. And so it all hit me pretty heavily. And I mentioned it on Facebook because I wanted to speak from that place instead of only speaking from the other end of the wave. And then after being in that wave for a little while, detaching from it, not trying to change it, but just being in it. On the other side of that wave, I started to feel great, and a bunch of things happened, including a boat I've been dreaming about for years and years and years. Like, the situations just seem to magically turn themselves around so that, we now own it. And that came, and I'm very clear that if I hadn't allowed myself to go to all sides of that emotional wave, that these things wouldn't have happened. And a lot of great things have happened for me lately. And a lot of it is about freeing up this emotional place. So learning to be in my design relative to solar plexus.
I just want to say a couple things about that. Thanks for the new vote. Yes, Dorinda, you'll have to see it. So we often in our culture, we've been raised, don't let your emotions lead or make decisions in business. Don't be emotionally unsteady. Get a handle on things. And okay, that's okay. By human design, you are cutting off half of your being. And so what we're saying here is to just honor, acknowledge, ride those waves. Don't take them too seriously. I used to freak out when this guy would go into hopelessness and despair, and I'd have to fix it. And I think there was something wrong. And oh my gosh, is he bipolar? And what's going on? No, it's his design. And as easily as he might go in, he comes right back out. And it's actually a beautiful thing. I actually know that we're about to have some huge business or personal breakthrough when he goes down that side of the wave. So just honor it and know that it's there to serve you. You're not going to pitch a tent there, I promise, if you actually just honor it and acknowledge it and watch it. And don't look for things to fix or change. Just ride it.
Thank you. Yeah. So what I've learned, an important thing I've learned in the last couple of years studying human design is that I don't exist in order to be happy. Like, I think I came into this thinking that that my existence was about being happy. And so I felt like a failure a lot of the time because I'm not happy that much. I mean, I'm happy some portion of the time, and I'm sad, and I'm confused, and I'm frustrated. I mean, I'm every kind of emotion. And so that's been tremendous freedom for me when I realized that my purpose is to be realized, and to have experience, and to be fully in life. My purpose is not to be a certain mood, which is chemical in nature anyway. So it's like ridiculous to think that it should be a certain thing. So people with defined solar plexus will experience this wave, and typically in some regular pattern. Maybe 24 hours, maybe 36. I recommend, especially if you have defined solar plexus, to keep a journal for a while, and to just notice, keep a mood journal basically. And when you start to experience the regularity and the rhythm of this, what I found that offered me a lot of security, I guess, to see that to have this demonstrated as a pattern and a rhythm.
And also realize in your business, if you're riding that lower part of the wave, don't try to go out and do things that are going to require a different kind of feeling energy. Lean into it. There's probably some gifts in there, some information that's trying to be revealed.
Yeah, and of course, use some common sense with it. If you're in deep grief and you can't get yourself off the floor and you're in a puddle of tears, maybe that's not the time to have a sales call. Maybe change that appointment. On the other hand, I've actually found that when I'm in a place that I would judge myself traditionally as being not in a good place, quite often the best opportunities have come from that place. There's a certain realness to me. There's a certain texture, I think, that and fullness that can come from being fully in whatever emotion you're in. And so also, if you have a defined solar plexus, you also have emotional authority. So if you remember, now emotional authority means that we make decisions based on how we feel. So we can only make good decisions based on how we feel if we're in touch with how we feel. We can only be in touch with how we feel if we allow ourselves to feel all the possible ways that there are to feel. If we're in a pattern of using activity, drugs, chemicals, whatever, to modulate how we feel, then we effectively have no more emotional authority. We don't have access to this because we've artificially constrained it. So we've made our best diagnostic instrument unavailable to us.
And what are we going to do instead? We're going to bounce around in our head. Should I not? This or that? Yes or no? I don't know. On and on and on. When all along you had the wisdom within you, we're numbing it out.
Yeah, thank you. And so to move to undefined solar plexus, so half of the people in the world have an undefined solar plexus. And so these individuals will absorb and amplify the emotions of others. And these people tend to be very sensitive to emotionally charged situations. So, and if you have, most people that have undefined solar plexus will relate to this, that you'll be in places and all of a sudden you'll feel very emotional. You don't even know why. Well, the reason is you're feeling someone else's emotion, which again is going to make you very empathic and is going to give you the ability to be a good therapist, a good salesperson, a good empath, a good coach. If you have, and also because of this, if you have undefined solar plexus, you can't exactly trust your own feelings because they might not be yours. And for this reason, it's really important that you follow your own inner authority. So if you have sacral authority or if you have splenic authority, make decisions not based on what feels good in the moment, but from the gut, not from the emotions. And this can be tough to discern, what's an emotion and what's a deep guttural kind of gut feeling.
Again, reason to lean into the body awareness and body wisdom. Okay, so we have a couple of questions here.
Okay.
I think we're done with this center, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to stop plowing through the centers and let this breathe.
We'll do the last two next time.
Last three, yeah. So there's a couple of questions here, and if you'd like, we can actually, let me stop the screen share and we'll come back and we'll actually unmute you.
Cool.
Hang on a minute. There we go. Okay, so Dorinda, do you want to actually speak to this? You said there's something about your your way journaling. Can you hear me, Dorinda?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
Go
Yeah,
ahead and tell us.
I was asking about the journaling because I do have a defined solar plexus, and I understand the writing the highs and the lows. So like, how long do you need to journal for, and how does that all work?
I would set your sights on a couple weeks.
Okay.
So you're journaling how you feel relative to time and also relative to situations. And so you need to go long enough until you get a real feeling for, first of all, what's my normal rhythm, having little to do with situations. Because I used to think that I was in reaction to a lot of situations, that it turned out that I just, I often wake up with kind of a cloud of hopelessness. And
Yay!
By the time I have a cup of tea and make my bed, it's gone.
Or the other day, I just found myself tearing up. Actually, it was this morning, tearing up about something with my children. And then I said, I don't know why I'm sad about that. It might just be I'm riding the wave, and it's kind of time to be sad. And then I'm reaching for something to be sad about. It's really just interesting to be the observer of all this. And then when you observe, then you can have dominion over it, which is what's so exciting.
I don't know if I misheard. I thought you were saying you went from the highs to the lows like 24 to 36 hours. Did I hear you right? That seemed quick to me. That's why I'm asking.
Do I? Yeah. So different. It's in my case, it seems to vary. 24 hours. I seem to touch on like hopelessness every 24 hours, usually in the morning.
Okay. So you're not a morning person.
That's the problem.
Well, yeah, I get up early and I enjoy mornings and I'm productive. Interestingly enough, my best, clearest, mentally clearest, most productive time is after this hopelessness emotion. That seems to stimulate. So it's like, it's useful for me.
Okay.
If I wait, quite often I'll wake up at like 2 a.m, briefly, and sort of run worst case scenario of everything in my life. And so that's like the fear time.
Yeah.
Quite often, sunsets when I'm on the boat, often, when a sunset comes, it's just the most sublime time for me. And I realize it's not just the boat. There's some time about sundown when I have a certain mood that I tends to feel good that way. So I tend to correlate with the sun going up and down, maybe more than most people, but I'm also outside a lot. And so that could be, but there's other emotions I find are more like weekly, there's certain, like rage and anger for me seems to happen like day 8, I just,
That's when I'm gone.
yeah.
So the point is, just observe it, honor it. Don't try and avoid it. Don't try and drink away from it. Just be okay with it, and just because it's your source of creativity and who you are, and it's been so beaten out of us.
Yeah.
So thank you. That's a really good question. It'll take you as long as it takes you yourself. Okay, let's see. We had Donna. Yes, actually, I liked your point. You want to say more about that, Donna?
I don't know. I used to have these days where I would just, I very much relate to this like cycle of feeling sad and then looking for something to be sad about. Yep. I would go, what am I sad about? There must be something making me sad. And I've had this, these waves my whole life. I definitely recognize that. But when I was, before I had kids, every once in a while, I would just wake up and go, I just can't face the world today. I mean, it didn't happen a lot, maybe a few times a year. And I would call in sick to work if it was a work day. And I would literally tell myself, I'm not getting dressed. I'm not taking a shower. I'm just curling up with a good book in bed. I'm only getting up to like go to the bathroom and eat. And I would eat in bed. And then, but usually by the end of the day, I was completely sick of it. And like I had enjoyed the book and I was like, okay, I got to get out of bed and do something. But like I had gotten past it.
Yeah, the wave will run itself out. People are so afraid of it that they, that which you resist persists. So that malaise is going to just stay unless you lean into it. That's human design's belief. That's my belief. So that's a great
But I don't do that anymore. Like I know my life, like I'm like, I can't lie in bed for a day unless I'm sick.
Right. Well, maybe there's other ways to find a lying in bed day. Maybe it's a lying in bed hour, who knows, but
Yeah.
you're aware of it. Yeah. And you're up to you're at a really fertile time right now. So, I would really look at this and give yourself permission. If you want your business to thrive, and if you want to enjoy your business and your life, leaning into your design is the way to do it. So thank you.
Thanks.
Pamela, I'm going to unmute you in case you want to say more about splenic and, or can you unmute yourself? There you are. Okay, Pamela, you had a question about splenic authority, splenic awareness?
Just because it's been referenced about if that's your inner authority, and I'm looking at my family, and mine says splenic awareness authority, and everybody else is splenic authority. So I just wondered if that word awareness is a different kind of authority.
It's a good question. I don't know it to be different, but I will certainly check on that now that you say that. I've never heard of splenic awareness authority.
We'll have to look into that. Splenic, well, because the spleen is an awareness center, right?
Yeah.
So.
So maybe it's just different programs.
Yeah, we'll double check.
Double check that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yes, Cynthia, mental health days, absolutely. Call them whatever you need to call them. A living by my design day,
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, whoever decided what a normal work schedule was, or a life schedule, or a common, probably didn't check everyone's design to make sure
it's
that was
one size fits all.
that was the ideal thing, right?
Well, it's a generator with whatever. Okay. Does anybody else have more questions? Those are good ones. Really great attention, really sharp questions as usual. Okay. So just there's no to-dos on this. There's read over the chart, maybe listen to the replay if you want, contemplate, sip. You want to I loved Michael's example of contemplation. You want to tell them what that is again? This is the homework.
Yeah, so an example I heard that I like is that you're by a stream. And the first example is meditation. So you're sitting by the stream and boats are going by, and you're noticing the boat going by, and then you're letting go of the boat and it goes by, and then you sit there and there's no boat, and then there's another boat. And so that's, watching thoughts that way would be an example of meditating. And then an example of contemplating as opposed to that would be there's a boat going down the stream and you're walking along the stream next to the boat, just being aware of the boat. So, having a thought and just going along and being aware, not interacting with it, not hailing the boat, not doing anything to the boat, but just walking along. And then the third example would be living life. And that would be you get in the boat, you turn around and point it upstream, and you row as hard as you can to get upstream.
Right. So appreciate your vessel. In human design, we talk about the vessel. Appreciate your vessel. That's what we're trying to do, is provide information about your unique vessel and honor it and just watch it. It's phenomenal. And we'll pick it up next week. Well, we'll pick it up on Friday with the group coaching, and then again next week. So, yeah.
And we'll be on Facebook too. Any more questions pop up, we'll be checking Facebook and responding to them.
And just so you know, coming up soon, we'll be mapping this more directly to your businesses, where we'll be looking at each of your marketing plans, your sales approaches, and trying to map your design to those. So stay tuned for that. We're just trying to lay the foundation first of what human design actually is.
As Linda said, we're going to post the scripts or the outlines of all these last 3 classes probably this week. So be on the lookout for those. So you're going to have a lot of resources
to chew on. Okay. All right. Great.
Thank you.
Nothing else. All right. Thanks, you guys. You're really amazing. Have a good week.